Good evening, chat. How are we doing? Sorry, I'm starting a little bit later than I would usually do. I did Normal Island with Curtis earlier on today, so I was a little bit tied up. I needed to charge my phone so I could use it as a camera so they didn't turn off like it did before. And also my microphone's a little bit quiet. For some reason the levels got turned down. I don't know why. This is a good volume. Yeah, perfect. Right, we're back. Hello. Got a YouTube Premium 2-month free trial. It's like, I would hate to say that it was bad because that's how they got me. They got me to subscribe to YouTube Premium by giving me a free trial. And I thought, well, actually, this is really good. I prefer YouTube Premium to not having YouTube Premium. And then they got me by getting me to pay for it. But honestly, genuinely a really good purchase that I made by paying for YouTube Premium. Well, I guess if you've got YouTube Premium, I might as well monetize my streams, because if people with YouTube Premium watch lots of my long form content, I get way more money from them than if I was watching advertised content. So the Empire of Starmer is being prepared. Yeah, very true. Yeah, for some reason my microphone volume got turned down by my PC. I think it was like an auto volume like thing that I'd not turned off when I went into StreamYard with Curtis, but we'll see, we'll see. And if you use Spotify, you get to cancel that and use YouTube Music as well. I do that. I have cancelled Spotify, and I now only use YouTube Music. I will say YouTube Music is shit. It's not good. YouTube Music sucks, but I'm not paying for a better piece of software that I'm getting as a worst version of for free. So I use YouTube Music out of necessity rather than because I think that the user interface is good, because the user interface is shit. It's really bad. You have YouTube Premium as well. Well, good. If you've got YouTube Premium, you might as well just have my videos on, just on constant repeat in the background with your YouTube Premium, and then that means you maximize watch time that it gives me money for if you've got YouTube Premium. So, because I think half of your YouTube Premium payment goes towards paying the creators who you watch, and the other half goes to YouTube. So I think if it's $9.99 for YouTube Premium, so it might be $11.99, so like £6 of it goes towards YouTube creators. So if you use up your watch time, just like watch, like when you go to bed, just like have my videos on repeat. And so 99% of your watch time is me. That means half of your YouTube Premium payment would end up going directly to me. Which is best for you to watch onto YouTube or Twitch. If you're watching the live streams, I get more for you watching on Twitch and watching adverts on Twitch, or that you're a subscriber anyway. But if you're watching the stream VOD back, if you're watching the video on demand later, then it's best watching on YouTube, because then I get your premium money. Yeah, the family plan also works like that as well, I believe. Yeah, if you can also, if you download. So I need to monetize the stream. So I need to be good and not swear too much on my stream, so I can monetize the VODs. Then if you download a monetized VOD, I get more money from YouTube Premium as well. Yeah, I need to be less sweary and make sure Kev is less sweary when I have Kev on. It also means people in chat need to be good as well and not throw C slurs around in chat, because that will demonetize videos as well. I could probably just block it. I probably could just like auto moderate it away from chat just to make sure I can monetize my videos. But all right, Sister Rose, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. Good to see you. Everyone go follow Sister Rose in chat. Oh yeah, I hope you're doing well. With that in mind, there's lots of content to get through. It probably won't be a long stream today, because we're starting so late. It probably won't be going further on than midnight, I would assume. It's a Saturday night, and I'm sure we've all got sleep to do. So I will be going to at least 12, though. At least 12. We've got lots of content to go through. So we're going to start off with the Keir Starmer interview with Nick Robinson. We'll start off with that, and then we'll see where we move on from there.
Westminster.
There was no sound there for a minute. Let me go back.
We've all got a big decision to make about who leads the country for the next 5 years, about who has power and influence in Westminster. You get the opportunity to have your say in the election on July the 4th. On Monday, we heard from the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and during this campaign, we're talking to other party leaders. Tonight, it's the turn of the Leader of the Opposition, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Keir, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on.
My promise at the start of this interview is that what you say in the next half hour or so will be broadcast in full. I want to give you the chance to make your case. Clearly want you to answer some questions. So if you would do your best to do that, one thing we should also make clear is you don't know what the questions are in advance.
Thank you.
3 weeks from today, you could be spending your first night in Downing Street as our new Prime Minister. Are you ready?
Yes, I know that we've got to earn every vote and not a seat has been won yet, and therefore I'm not complacent about it. But I've spent 4.5 years changing the Labour Party, getting it into a position where we could put our offer before the country. We unveiled our manifesto, a manifesto for wealth creation and for growth, to fix the fundamentals and take our country forward. So yes, we've prepared, we're ready, but
It's interesting that the wealth creation stuff, I think this kind of popped up in Labour rhetoric over the last couple of weeks or so. But it's very funny to me that this seems to be the central theme of what they're going with. Growth and wealth creation. It's all very Trussian, isn't it?
I'm conscious that every single vote has to be earned, and we're still at the stage of earning the votes.
And in order to earn them, many of our viewers are telling us that they still don't really know what you stand for. And what I want to just say to them is this is an important sales brochure, if you like, at election time, but it's your instincts, it's your values that may matter as much. So can we examine the evidence together of what Keir Starmer stands for and who he is? Quite a few subjects to get through. Let's start with the big promise at the heart of this manifesto. Change. That's what it says on the front cover. Now, you say to people the country is broken. And yet when I examine the changes here, they're very small. Why so?
A good question, because it's just continuity politics with very, very slight tinkering around the edges. As I said before, I've said it again, it says change on the front, but they are missing the words before it, which is nothing will fundamentally change.
I don't accept they're very small. What we've set out in the manifesto is a plan for change, a plan to grow the economy. I think that amongst the biggest problems of the last 14 years has been that the economy has been flat. We haven't grown the economy, and therefore we haven't had the money to put into our public services, which are crumbling, and we haven't been able to raise living standards. So we have to have a plan for growth. This is a bold plan for growth, and it's got within it tough things we're going to have to do, like changing the planning regulations, like having a national wealth fund, like having a new industrial strategy, a new skills strategy, and making sure that we set up enterprises like GB Energy, a publicly owned energy company.
It's not a publicly owned energy company. It's an investment fund. It's literally the National Wealth Fund you were talking about. Just that specifically is the vector that you use your wealth fund to invest it in private energy companies. Again, this is going to be share equity in private companies, and it's not even going to be majority share equity because they're expecting £3 of private investment for every £1
I'm literally a communist
of public investment. That's what they're actually proposing here. And I said, it's fine. It's not a terrible policy. It's going to be a way of at least attracting some private capital to the UK following Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, and should get us a non-zero amount of extra economic growth. That's fine. The planning system regulations are fine, but it's still not fundamental change, really, is it? It's not. And it's also not guaranteed to work. And it's also not guaranteed to grow the economy either.
You were very clear when you launched this that you hadn't got a magic wand to solve the country's problems overnight, and you've stressed, as you just have, that growth is the key to everything. We'll talk some more, I promise you, about growth. Let me tell you what I meant by small, though. You see, in this manifesto, there's a promise on schools, for example. You say they'll Labour will recruit an extra 6,500 teachers. How many extra teachers per school is that over 5 years?
Well, I haven't broken it down per school, to be perfectly honest, Nick.
One extra teacher for every 3 schools
but it's
over 5 years. That's a third of a teacher per school.
Two things I'd say about that. Firstly, that is set out in the manifesto very clearly as a first step, a down payment. One of the steps that I hope that we'll be taking literally on day one in government, starting down that recruitment.
And the problem as well is that this plan that they have, this commitment, this first steps that they've got, which includes recruiting police officers and teachers and doctors, they're not saying how they're going to do this. They're not offering them any money or any incentives. There's no mythical magic teacher tree that they can pull these down from, right? Especially when unemployment, I mean, it's going up, but it's still pretty low. Our workforce participation rate might be low, but loads of people are off sick. Again, it will take upfront investment in things like the NHS to get people off of our long waiting list to make them economically active again. But you're also going to need to have some kind of strategy to make these particular vocations appealing to people who you want to upskill into the role of teachers, doctors, whatever. And you're not going to be able to do that immediately, which you say you want to do immediately, especially since you want to recruit only from within the UK population and you're trying to wean the NHS off migrant labour. And again, you can want to do all of these things all you want. I'm not impugning the desire to do these things. Plenty of people want less migrant labour in this country. Plenty of people want more doctors. That's something that the public want. What I'm contesting here is that either of these things are possible at the same time. Because they are not. Clearly something's going to have to give. Unless, of course, you believe there is a magic doctor tree that doesn't exist.
The second thing is the particular problem that we're aiming this at is the lack of teachers in specific subjects in secondary school. So to give you an example, we don't have enough maths teachers in our state secondary schools. So people watching this who've got
Guys, let's just use the spare capacity in the private sector. Right.
I know, right? All that spare capacity that just somehow exists, yeah. It's all very silly, isn't it?
Teachers in our state secondary schools. So
let me just turn up the volume on this.
people watching this who've got children in state secondary schools will know that, or be familiar with the supply teacher, the PE teacher teaching maths. We have to fix that. And that's what the 6,500 teachers is about. It's a first step. It's billed as a first step.
A small first step.
Well,
It's described as tiny by some of the independent experts.
Well, I mean, it is tiny. Thank you for the donation from £10, Jack. Appreciate the support. Haven't donated in a while, so enjoy. Off to Rhodes tomorrow with family for a week so I can get away from this rainy austerity isle and put the kids' stuff out of my mind for a while. Well, I'm off to a different Greek island on Tuesday. I'm off to Zante, with my family. So I shall hopefully be enjoying ourselves before having to consign ourselves to 5 more years of tedious continuity politics.
Give me another example if I can.
Just on that, if a child doesn't have a maths teacher at the time they need it...
Oh, it's a big deal for them. Understood.
Well, it's not a one-year problem or 2-year problem, a budgeting problem.
But the thing is, the issue, of course, with like maths and science teachers, they're not being taught by PE teachers because there aren't enough maths teachers that are being employed. There are a bunch of unemployed maths teachers who haven't been utilised. We don't have people who have the necessary degrees to teach this. There are not enough people who have the teaching qualifications to be able to do this. Well, my first step is to get more maths teachers teaching. What are you going to do? Are you going to get people like fast track through PGCEs in like 6 months or something? It's not much of a first step if they've got to go through all of the teacher training and then be able to teach people first time. Like, I've studied physics for 4 years.
I'm literally a communist.
I could probably do secondary school maths. I do remember at least most of like the maths I studied at A-level or whatever. I'm not going to be able to just teach people off of the bat. Especially when, as people have pointed out in chat, people who even do have the qualifications, who do have the necessary teaching qualifications, don't want to do it because the pay sucks. And the ethos sucks of what they expect teachers to do within the DOE.
problem, that will live with them for the rest of their lives because they may not be able to go on to do A levels. Apprenticeships hard to get if you haven't got maths. So it is it is a very meaningful change for the children that need it.
Meaningful, but relatively small. Let me give you another example. The NHS. Big sounding promise, 2 million extra NHS appointments a year. There were around 150 million appointments last year. So 2 million extra isn't very much. And let me just illustrate that in terms of the budget of the NHS. Big numbers, hard to grasp. So what I've got in here is the NHS budget, 100 pennies to illustrate them. Let's do that. There's the NHS budget. So how much more is Sir Keir Starmer promising? There we are. Not even 1 penny. It's not even 1% of the budget.
And that's the thing. That's a really good point by Nick Robinson, because I think what Starmer's team have done in their first steps, in their kind of marquee promises, is promise some numbers that seem big and abstract, so that they look like fancy promises to the public of changes that they're going to be able to make. But once you put it in context, once you visualize it, like Nick Robinson has done here, you realize just how small fry it is. In fact, there was an article that came up on my feed today. It was tweeted out by Andrew Fisher, the ex-Corbyn policy advisor. If you look here, Labour and Tories would both leave the NHS worse off than under austerity by the Nuffield Trust. Like, again, they are promising austerity budgets, and unless you visualise it, it's difficult for the public to take account of what those numbers actually mean in reality, rather than just in abstract. And it's a clear rhetorical device that they've used to hoodwink the public into thinking this isn't an end to austerity, when it absolutely is a continuation of austerity. That's exactly what they're promising, is a continuation of austerity. And they're trying to hoodwink the public into thinking that that's not what they're doing, through clever rhetorical trickery. It's just like trying to differentiate between a millionaire and a billionaire if you contextualize it elsewhere.
That you're adding. It's a small promise.
Well, again, it's a first step. It's a down payment. It's 40,000 extra appointments and operations each and every week. So that means operating theatres, operating weekends and evenings. 40,000 extra a week. That's 2 million a year. And that means that we can get that waiting list down, which is the best part of 8 million.
Providing you don't use all that money for paying off the doctors, you see. You've said
no,
you'll sort the doctors strike. You might have the doctors, you've got mental health, you've got GPs, A&E. That could take up that 1p that I put down there, the 1%.
Nick, that is specifically for these 40,000 appointments. And we've set up the model that we want to operate. And I do push back on this idea that
saying we've set up the model we want to operate is not an answer to where are you going to find this funding for doctors' pay disputes and all of the extra recruitment and all of the extra investment into new infrastructure. That's not an answer to that question. You're being asked specifically because you're the one who wants to have everything fully costed. There's nothing in our manifesto that requires raising taxes, for example. All these canards they've come out with. You can't just say, well, that's a plan that we've got. No, you need to explain to him in financial terms how you're going to justify what's going to pay for all of these extra doctors, all of this extra staff, all of this workforce plan, and indeed on top of that, solving the pay dispute with the junior doctors. You're going to have to be able to put this to people. I think costed manifestos are pointless. I understand why people do them. But you're the one who's bandied about this household budget nonsense. You've got to answer in those same terms that you're putting to the public here, Keir. You can't just say, well, that's our plan, vote for the mystery box. You're being asked a real question here.
it doesn't really make much difference. If you're on a waiting list right now watching this programme, it makes a huge difference if you can get off that waiting list. I have no end of people coming up to me saying, I've been on a waiting list 12 months, I've been told it's going to be another 18
nothing.
months. That is physically uncomfortable for...
No, stop regaling me with tales of people that you've stood near. Stop trying to pretend the random anecdotes of what people have told you about how hard it is being on a waiting list. That's not policy. That's not costing. That's not funding. That's nothing. This seems to be his entire political campaign. It's just nonsense anecdotes. Think of these people I've stood near.
For people, they're often in pain. It also means, in many cases, they can't get back into the labour market. So, again, it's a first step.
If you don't spend the money on other things, you see, and the problem that you have, you'll know, it was all over the front pages of the newspapers on the day after your manifesto launch, which is the independent experts, the people that we respect about the public finances, say, look, Keir Starmer would have more money. He's actually going to have less money because baked into the Treasury's figures that you and the Labour Party have accepted, are £18 billion of cuts. That's about 10% of the NHS budget. That's a third of all schools in England would close. You're not being open with people about that, are you?
Well, look, two things there, Nick. Firstly, on the NHS, we've set out the first steps, which is the 40,000 appointments. But we've also made it clear in the manifesto that we want to reform the NHS, that we want to make sure that we move to a preventative model where we are catching issues and diseases and scanning much, much earlier, where we're intervening earlier, making much more use of...
It's clear. This guy's had training. This guy's clearly had training. Again, I worked in sales. I know what this is. You take the broad strokes of what people are saying, and you say things like, well, I get that you have an issue with here, but what we've done is we've set out these first steps. Go back to the points you've been trained to repeat to get them into the public consciousness over and over and over again. This repeat, all of those same talking points. And then when it comes to the question, see, you even saw it in the last one as well. He went, okay, well, we've got these things, but those are our first steps. And then he had to get cut off by Nick Robinson. Very, very clever way of avoiding the point that's being made here. Very kind of Blairite thing to do. Blair was really good at this.
Technology, and to give an example, AI working with a radiologist is 6 times better.
Because he's talking about like AI and preventative models for the NHS. This wasn't the question that he was asked. He was asked about the funding shortfall for unprotected departments that's been identified by the IFS, that he's already accepted those figures. But he's been allowed here to just completely straw man, to completely move the goalposts and completely shift the topic of the discussion. Very clever.
At scanning early for cancer. That's hugely important.
But what about that 18 billion, you see? Do you accept the figure exists? Will you say now that Labour under Sir Keir Starmer will not cut the courts, the prisons, the roads, council budgets and so on?
Well, as far as public services are concerned, obviously I ran one for 5 years, the Crown Prosecution Service. I believe in our...
Bingo. Literally every single time. We saw this in the Beth Rigby discussion too. Whenever he was asked about the future of public services and the austerity that's baked in, he never answered the question. He just said, you can trust me with public services. I ran a public service. I was the director of public prosecution. I reformed that just like I reformed the Labour Party. Just repeating these phrases over and over and over again. Does this answer the question? No, of course it doesn't.
Public services, and I want to see them properly run and properly funded.
Sure,
that's
but will they be
fundamental
cut?
to me. Firstly, there'll be a cash injection straight away into our police, into our hospitals, into our schools, our first step. So that's the first thing that we will do.
Those are all protected departments. Council budgets, the ones going into Section 114 notices, the ones that you've already promised you won't be bailing out with government money. That's unprotected. That's where the cuts are. Education and health are both protected.
We will also carry out reform. I know from running a public service that, yes, you can put more money in the top and you get a slightly better product. But if you want a really better service, then you've got to reform. And we will have to do public service reform.
I'm hearing that. And forgive me, I think the viewers will say, the question was, will there be cuts in other areas? And the independent experts say there will be cuts in other areas unless you borrow more or tax more or grow the economy incredibly fast. So are you saying there will be cuts or not?
Well, Nick, firstly, we're not going back to austerity. I ran a public service during...
Literally, again, we're not going back to austerity. I ran a public service. This isn't the question that you were asked. There are £18 billion of cuts to unprotected departments. Answer the fucking question. Jesus. Trying to get blood out of a stone with this guy. Just lie after lie after lie after lie. I can't believe people are going to make this man Prime Minister. I really can't. Genuinely cannot believe how people are going to make this completely deceitful man Prime Minister.
You are a liar.
Because I already called out that he would just say the phrase, there's no return to austerity. Even though £18 billion of public sector cuts, I won't do the Stephen Flynn accent, honestly. He won't even acknowledge the question.
austerity. I know what that feels like. I know the damage that it did, and that's been the legacy of the last 14 years. So we're not going to go to austerity. But secondly, I do want to take on this challenge that you rightly put to me.
It's really important to understand as well. I'm sorry I just keep pausing, but it's really important. The line about we need to reform our public services to make them more efficient. This is exactly the line that David Cameron took when he did austerity in 2010. He said, there isn't any money left, but don't worry, you won't see drops in service provision, because whilst the budgets are going down, we're going to find efficiencies. We're going to reform our public services. Think of the Lansley reforms, for example. And these reforms will make them work better. So when we take money away from these departments, you will not see a drop in service provision. The unfortunate part, of course, is that these were already incredibly efficient services. We had a very efficient public sector in this country, and we had done for a very, very long time. There were no efficiency savings to be found. So when he did these public sector cuts, there were no efficiency savings, and all it actually led to was a reduction in service provision. Is there just going to be this magical moment where Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and all of these people just magically find all of these inefficiencies that the massively cutting government of Cameron and Osborne just didn't find? I find that difficult, especially since that in our healthcare service, the only real inefficiencies that we have are the private sector subcontracting that involves inefficiencies in the budget due to paying off shareholders and CEOs. And they're not going to get rid of those, they're going to increase those, because West Streeting has been very happy to increase those. Again, there is no efficiency savings to be made. This is what he's dog whistling towards here. And yes, exactly the same lines we heard from George Osborne. There's no money left. They've run out of the government's credit card. Lines that have been repeated by Darren Jones recently as well. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury Shadow Minister, who is going to be the one who, apart from the Chancellor, Rachel, is going to have his hands on the books. And he's already saying the same kind of neoliberal magic money tree style garbage that the Conservative Party have been rattling around for 14 years as they did austerity that whole period. This is a dangerous man and a dangerous government that's going to be coming into our politics and coming into government on the 5th of July.
In relation to tax and spend, because the assumption of those that are saying these are the forecasts is that we cannot do any better than we've done in the last 14 years. That, in other words, it's impossible to grow the economy, and therefore you're going to have to tax more. Back to your
magic wand, aren't you? It's always when you're asked a tough question, you go, I've got a magic wand. It's called growth.
No. It's not a wand. It's a plan. That's the complete difference. Our manifesto that we.
Come on! It's not a wand, it's a plan. If you had a plan for how much you were going to grow the economy, you would have OBR projections. You would have some kind of projected growth plan of how your economic investment plans are going to grow the economy and how those tax receipts are going to be used, the additional tax receipts, to plug the gap in the nation's finances. But the IFS have done the projections already, and they have told us already we're going to get £18 billion of public sector cuts. Answer the question. This is literally the answer to the question that you need to be making here, and you're completely avoiding it.
We launched is the culmination of 4 years' working with business partners, working with others about what is the change. So I say to every sector, what is inhibiting the growth that you need? And they say to me, let's take big infrastructure projects. Planning. We can't get our roads, our rail, all of our projects are massively over budget and overdue because of planning.
Well,
industrial
let's ask you a question about then so I'm clear then.
No, but
Sorry, let's not go through a list.
Douglas Barr, you sound like you want reform in power, get a grip. If you think, right?
Fucking neoliberalism.
I think you might be under like a false premise here, Douglas, that this is somehow get the Tories out and fingers crossed hope the mystery box is good channel. You are sorely fucking mistaken, Douglas. This channel is a holding our politicians to account channel. It's not a Labour fucking circle jerk. Especially not when they're offering shit policies, they're offering shit governance, and they're promising more austerity. I understand that scrutinising the red team is bad for you because you see politics as being team sports, right? Politics isn't team sports. It's about ideology, it's about power, and it's about policy. And these people are offering you shit policy. They're offering you austerity. They're offering public sector cuts. They're offering public sector privatisation. And you're just going to allow them to waltz into number 10 with no scrutiny whatsoever. I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry. But the scrutiny is not going to come from people like you, because you're too busy in your little Labour circle jerk. It's going to have to come from people like us on the left, because all of the policy that needs scrutinising is right-wing policy that our right-wing media and our right-wing political class
This
will
is
not be
literally
scrutinising.
a
Right?
communist.
There is nobody, literally nobody is scrutinising the absolute garbage, the literal skip fire worth of policies that Labour are bringing into government in 3 weeks' time. Only the left are scrutinising these people. If we don't do it, because people like you completely... What's the word I'm looking for? People like you who are complacent. The complacency of people like you who think that the entirety of our politics is going to be solved by replacing the blue team with the red team. The complacency of looking at an entire policy perspective, an 135-page policy prospectus, no less, and not scrutinising any of the policy and just thinking, well, red team in power, it's going to be good. That's the kind of complacency that will lead to 5 years' time when reform will be in government, because Labour will have failed, because their policies do suck, and we'll be the ones sitting around saying, I told you so. But unfortunately, I told you so won't fucking stop the tide of fascism with it. I told you so won't save this country after 5 years of austerity. I do not want to be fucking sitting here saying I told you so. I want to be sitting here in 5 years' time with a Keir Starmer government that's been held to account by people who know how policy works, who knows how good policy works, to ensure our country doesn't go the fucking dogs. Right? Because unfortunately, unlike some people, I actually fucking like my country. I actually like living here despite how fucking shit it is. I like the communities I live around. I like the people that I live around. These people are what matter to me. The people I see every day. When I go to the shops, right? When I go and when I go to the local kebab place and the boss man I care about his fucking life, right? And I care enough to want to look at an incoming government whose policy is promising 5 more years of austerity, 5 more years of cuts to public services, 5 more years of a disintegrating social contract, and thinking this is a recipe for disaster. This is a recipe for a 5-year failed government that will get replaced by fascism when it fails to deal with people's material conditions. I'm seeing what's happening in Europe right now, and that is a blueprint of what our country will look like in 5 years' time. So don't fucking come into my chat telling me I want Reform UK in power. Because the one thing I'm trying to stop is Nigel Farage being Prime Minister of this country. Because one thing that will lead to Farage being Prime Minister of this country is Labour coming to power and doing nothing. Now fuck off. Get my channel.
Let's deal with one at a time. Planning. Let's ask you that. Are you saying now, because I need to get the economy growing, what I will do is say to someone who's objecting to electricity pylons going across the field near their house, sorry, they've got to be built. We've got to get the economy moving. If you're worried about huge new housing development, sorry, that has got to be built. Are you prepared to make enemies to make the economy grow?
Yes. We're going to have to be tough. We're going to have to change the way things are done. I'll give you one short example. I won't take long, but it makes my point. I spoke to the CEO of an energy company, say, how long would it take you to put a wind turbine farm up? He said, I could do it in 2 years. He said, you wouldn't get any power out of it for 13 years because...
Thank you for the 20 gifted, Scouse.
Fucking neoliberalism.
That's very much appreciated. Thank you very much for the support.
I'd lose 5 years to planning, another 6 or 7 years before the grid connected. We cannot go
Fucking
on like that.
I'll give you another
We've got to
example,
take
if I
tough
could.
decisions.
Sorry to rush you, but there's quite a lot to get through. Are you willing to make enemies on Brexit? Any business, big business will say to you, if you want to grow the economy, get rid of those barriers, or at least minimise those barriers. Now, to do it, you're going to have to look at people who voted leave and say, look, I'm sorry, we need to get closer to the EU to grow our economy.
Well, Nick, we obviously had a referendum on this. I campaigned to remain, I voted to remain, but the vote was to leave. We've left and we're not going back into membership of the EU.
You're not that keen on
means
growth.
The single market,
No,
the
but you're not
customs
that
union.
keen on growth then.
Well, 2 or 3 things about that, Nick. The first is, I do think we can do better than the botched deal that we got under Boris Johnson. I think every business...
The thing is, I think that it's absolutely fine to say that there is a problem with our economy because of Brexit, right? But we also get economic opportunities because of the monetary financing of government spending that we can now do now outside the Lisbon Treaty. So the thing is, if we changed our economy to be more kind of like what the left wanted out of Brexit, that'd be great. We could do things like that. But they are sticking to a fundamental framework that was failing before Brexit. So, if you wanted to keep the kind of globalized international market that we want to be a part of by remaining part of the single market and the customs union, then, that would probably be fine. That probably would do good things for our economy. But is it what people voted for? Well, no. Thank you, James from the internet, with the raid. 107 viewers. Welcome, welcome in, welcome in. Please refresh your screens. You are through to the No Justice stream. We talk about UK politics 6 days a week. 7 days a week at the moment, usually, actually, because it's election period. I will be on holiday next week, though, but I'll be trying to do content whilst I'm away. So if UK coverage of the election sounds like your bag, it sounds like your deal, please drop a follow. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel at No Justice MTG as well. YouTube is my main platform, I guess, now, but I always stream on Twitch too. So please do give us a follow. Everyone in my chat on YouTube and indeed over on Twitch, please go and drop a follow to James from the internet, US-based leftist. Please go and drop a follow. We stan. We stan James from the internet on this channel. And thank you for the resub, James. Thank you for the re-upping your membership, Stu Viking. Thank you, Randomo Guy, for the 5 gifted on YouTube. And Effie Hungry, thank you for the 5 gifted over on Twitch as well. Thank you all for the continued support. We are currently, Raiders, watching the BBC main interview with Sir Keith Stonger himself, Sir Kid Starver, Sir War Crimer, Sir Queer Harmer, the man who almost certainly will be Prime Minister in 3 weeks' time, having an interview, and he's not answering any questions because the man's a fucking snake.
Business thinks that. So if there are businesses that are watching this, yes, I hear what you say about the barriers to trade, and we are going to do something about that. But the second thing, and I think this is important, is if you look at the problems for growth over the last 14 years, they were there, or many of them were there, before Brexit. So the idea that the sort of single silver bullet is simply the relationship with the EU is not something I accept.
But you're willing to take people on.
Industrial strategy, skills, these are all issues that are there, have been there, and we need to grapple with.
We are inevitably going to move on to tax in just a second.
I mean, having an industrial strategy is easier outside of the European Union. Not having to worry about things like competition laws allows you to have a really kind of pinpoint China-style industrial strategy on how the government directs industry. But we're not revoking any of the EU-based competition laws, so hey-ho.
I think, the questions that people are asking about you, and you, when you launched your campaign, said, I've got to win people's trust, you said, on money and on borders and security, and we'll come to those other two, is this question of who you really are. I want you just to look at a photograph here. Sometimes this is who you are. There's Tony Blair, there's Keir Starmer. Spot the difference. Yeah, and
well, Tony hasn't got his tie done up.
And the last election, yes, and it is looking a bit more ruffled. At the last election, let's have a look at how you looked. There you are with Jeremy Corbyn. Now, you said to voters...
Oh.
This week, when you had said that he would make a brilliant Prime Minister, when you said you were 100% behind him, when you said he was your friend, you effectively said to us, I didn't really mean it. I had to say it because I wanted to get Labour MPs elected. Isn't the problem you've got, if you didn't mean what you said then, how do we know that you mean what you say now?
You are a liar.
Thank you, Mick Lynch, for elucidating my point for me. Yeah, if you say one thing when you don't mean it, and then you contradict that later
I'm going to live rent-free in his head
by saying something that contradicts it, what do you call that, Nick? What do you call somebody who says things that they know aren't true deliberately? What do you call that? What's a word that you could use to describe a person who says things that they know aren't true and they don't mean? Oh, actually, over and over and over again. Like, compulsively, one might say. What would you call somebody who compulsively does the thing where they say things that they know aren't true? What would you call? What's a word that you could use? Very succinct. 2 syllables, maybe, about how you would describe a person that does those things. Yeah, I think chat has got it. He'll be a liar. You call that lies. It's called lying.
That is a disgrace.
Because the man is a liar. The man is absolutely a liar.
Well, Nick, what I said was I didn't think we would win the last
You are a
election
liar.
in 2019. I don't think many people did. I'd be surprised if you yourself did. I remember the sense of foreboding when Parliament went up for that election, the sense that we were never going to win this election.
But your Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, she didn't say make a brilliant Prime Minister. She didn't even serve him.
No,
there are lots of very good Labour MPs who just said, I don't agree with this guy. I'm not going to allow things out of my mouth that I don't believe.
Yeah, Nick, look, people took different positions. I accept that.
Yeah, other people didn't lie. You know what? Fair play to the Labour Together
You
people.
are a liar.
They stayed in the party knowing they didn't agree with everything to try and usurp the party later, but at least they kept their head down and pretended that they were being silent. You, however, you lied. You deliberately and maliciously lied. You openly lied. And he needed to lie as well, because he needed to be close to Corbyn to win over the left-wing members of the party. He needed to be close to Corbyn to win over the left-wing members of the party so that they would trust him when he was going to lie to them again about the policy prospectus that he was putting forward to be his Labour leader. He needed to have that lie all worked out.
To be the cat?
They had this all worked out from the start in the halls of Labour Together. They had it all worked out. You've got the trust of the people. You've served in the shadow cabinet. Therefore, when we lied to them with pledges, they'll believe you. And we did.
In 2016, I decided I would serve in the shadow cabinet because I thought that it was very important that we had an effective front bench on the question of Brexit, which dominated those years, 2016 to 2019. I thought that almost irrespective of the leadership of the Labour Party, this was going to frame the country for many years to come. And it was important to be on the front bench.
Here's another reason.
Yes, he wanted to be on the front bench so that he could try and railroad in the second referendum policy. That was one of a large number of reasons that the election campaign was tanked in 2019. This election that he knew they were going to lose. Yeah, he was one who pushed this election-losing policy. I'm not saying they would have won if they'd have done a different Brexit policy. It was clear that the public had their vast disagreements with a lot of Corbyn's issues on terms of national security and foreign policy, but whatever, that's by the by. They especially hated Labour's position on Brexit, and a lot of red wall voters abandoned them over this. And Keir Starmer, he full-throatedly supported the second referendum. In fact, a usually meek Keir Starmer in cabinet meetings was reported to be forceful and outspoken in a way he'd never been before, specifically for the second referendum policy. Makes you think, chat, what he was doing, doesn't it?
They took a different approach. I accept that, but
here's another
I
reason
thought
I
it was
ask.
important to be there.
2 Keir Starmer manifestos. There's this week's, and here is the one you ran to be leader under. They couldn't be more different. I mean, let's take this issue of tax that people are raising. Here you talk about economic justice. You talk about a core principle. You say, I'm in favour of increasing income tax for the top 5% of earners. This is no new taxes. This is, yes, new taxes. People are not sure what you really stand for.
I'll tell you, Nick, he was lying the first time. It's not that people are unsure what he stands for. We all know he's a liar. Again, there was never, ever any intention of running on those policies. We've heard so many people, so many journalists, so many Labour Party insiders. Just a couple of days ago, Ben Bradshaw was essentially just admitted it was all lies, but he was speaking to a different electorate. He was going to lie to the Labour electorate and then win them over. Ed Miliband never did this. Tony Blair never did this. They never pretended they were more left-wing than they were to win them over. It's the first time that it's been like an open display of contempt for the membership with this kind of litany of lies. There was never any intention of sticking to these pledges whatsoever. None at all. You can't just say, well, people don't know who you are. We know who he is. This is who he is. He is a liar. It's not more difficult than that. And also, given that this is a position that he's held for years now, why is it that it's only taken until 3 weeks until this man is going to be coronated the new Lord Protector of the UK with the biggest majority in history, that it's taken people to criticise this. That it's taken our press to go, maybe he was lying. Maybe this is somebody who has said contradictory things, almost deliberately so. Why is it taken up to now for this level of scrutiny to happen? Pathetic.
Well, I took a decision, Nick, that we had to change the Labour Party and drag it closer to the country. And I did that having thought long and hard about the last 4 elections, because we lost in 2010, 2015, 2017, 2019.
You are a liar.
I took the view that that was because we had drifted too far from working people, our central purpose. We had drifted to a place where we were essentially looking and...
I think that's not even true. Like, they drifted too far away from pensioners. Like, that's who they drifted too far away from. And it's fine, right? It's fine that you want to target a part of the electorate that usually wouldn't vote for you, right? It's fine if you want to do that. It's fine to say, look, working age people vote for us, but we seem ideologically out of sync with the retired, who are broadly patriotic, who broadly want to see their pensions protected, who want to see immigration come down, who want tougher policy on law and order, right? Just say it, just admit it. Stop lying that somehow the people who don't vote for you are working people. Working age people won a plurality of Labour votes in 2019.
I'm actually
Even
very right-wing, and I loved it.
Even 2019, working age people plurality voted for Labour. In 2017, even more than that. But in 2019, the famous electoral oblivion defeat, working age people in their plurality voted for Labour. In fact, the only working age demographic that didn't vote long income distribution for Labour plurality was people who earned £100,000 a year or more, and they voted Lib Dem. It was just the retired. And again, you could admit, it's fine to admit, we were chasing the votes of the retired who we lost on Brexit and on taxation, on foreign policy, on progressive issues, whatever. That's fine, but admit it. Admit that that's what you were doing. Don't just lie. Don't just lie about this wanting to come close to working people, because that's not true. It's just not true, is it?
And feeling like a party that was looking down on people across the country, and we got very badly beaten in 2019.
I think the underlying question is, did you mean it when you said it? Do you mean what you're saying now? Well, I think is the people know that you can change your mind. They know times change.
Well, I have changed my mind.
But there was no changed mind. Oh, come on, Nick. This is pathetic. This is pathetic journalism. This is pathetic journalism for you to say, oh, you should change your mind. It's not a problem. No, the whole pledges, they were all lies. Everyone admits that they're all lies now. Because, of course, the left are allowed to be lied to. It's fine to lie to the left. We are not political actors worth considering. And everyone admits it. We're a different electorate, in the words of Ben Bradshaw. Ridiculous.
And the reason for that is, having reflected politically on those 4 losses in a row, I took the decision that we needed to change the Labour Party and drag it closer to the country.
Let's talk about what you do say in this.
Yeah, well, I would also say this. I think that it's very important that we've got to a position now. We are very firmly saying country first, party second, and that has to dictate decisions. So
let's talk about tax, can we, in this document?
Yeah, but
I'll give you a chance to talk about it.
I'll finish just this point, and then, of course. So when I look at anything that was said or done before by me or anybody else, the prism or the test I put it through now is it truly country first, party second? If the answer to that is yes, then off we go.
That means nothing. That means literal nothing, country first, party second. If you fully believe in the project of democratic socialism, or even social democracy, or even social liberalism, if you believe in that project, then you must therefore also believe that it's good for the country. If you're joining a political party, you're joining that political party because of the vision that it puts forward, the ideology it represents. The Conservatives represent conservatism, the Liberal Democrats represent liberalism, the Labour Party represent Labourism, or social democracy or socialism, like some mix of the two, some kind of roundabout amalgamation of socialism and social democracy. If you believe in that project, you must then also believe that it is good for the country. That means that putting the country first is implementing the ideological policies that you believe best benefit the country. I believe the country is best when things are more equal, when workers control more of the means of production, where workers have more access to capital, where certain minorities have equal rights with others, right? We believe in equality broadly and equity. Here on the left, here on the kind of progressive side of the equation. That's what we believe in. We don't believe in it because it's some kind of a hobby horse. We don't believe in it because we think it's good for us. We believe it's good for the country. We believe it creates the best society. This idea that abandoning all of your principles is best for the country, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Again, it's just a nonsense answer, a complete nonsense answer.
The manifesto. If the answer is no, then we're not doing it. Because
Understood.
I think our party got too far from the country and from working people, I've put it back where I think it should always have been.
I ask you because I've covered politics for an awfully long time.
You are a
What people
liar.
say in their manifestos is only a tiny part of what they end up doing because events change. We have to look at your instincts, what you really believe. So let me ask you this. You've got a phrase, which is you're not going to put taxes up for working people, you say. And you won't put VAT up and you won't put
VAT,
income tax.
national insurance, we will not be putting them up.
So viewers have been in touch with us saying, I don't know what working people means. Jamie Oliver works. Is he a working but Victoria Beckham? What about the boss of Tesco? They all work. They're all very well paid. They're arguably very rich. Are they working people?
Well, people who pay their income tax, people who pay national insurance are working people. And that's why we've chosen income tax, national insurance and VAT, but income tax and national insurance paid by working people.
But therefore, rich people paying income tax who do work, they are not going to pay higher taxes under Keir Starmer.
No,
or you're not saying that. You're only just saying something much smaller than that.
I mean, he is saying that, and that's fine. That's fine to say that. Actually, this is one of the main things that actually makes sense. That you're not putting taxes on work up. Rather than saying on working people, if you said taxes on work, that'd be fine. Because that's what income is. Income tax is on work. Capital gains, that's not on work. Wealth taxes, that's on assets, right? But things like specifically national insurance and income tax, those are a payroll tax and a tax on work that you do, on money that you earn from working. Like, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. There's one thing I actually don't necessarily disagree with, even though, of course, the first pledge was to increase income tax on the top 5% of earners, which is a tax on working people, which is, of course, a lie that he originally told. But I'm fine. If he wants to rejig the plans on tax so the corporations and asset-rich people paid more in tax, that'd be great. But they've also not promised any capital gains tax rises, and they've ruled out wealth taxes, which are the taxes we want to be able to see. They haven't even talked about rejigging council tax, the most unfair tax in the country.
No, across the board for income tax, for national insurance and for VAT, there will be no increases. But Nick, that is why this manifesto is a plan for change, a plan for growth. And I know you say it's just a manifesto. I said yesterday, no surprises, no rabbits out the hat. That is 4 years' work.
I don't mean you have a secret plan. I mean that the things happen and people have to react. And people want to know how you might react. Let me put an example to you, if I could. You see, people note what you're not saying. They know you are saying that you won't increase certain taxes, but they note that you're not replying when asked questions. I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to waste the viewers' time. But there are working people, for example, people who build up a small business, go and sell it. They make what's called a capital gain.
No, that's not a tax on work, though. If they're an owner, they are not a worker. If you're being taxed on your assets, that's not assets that you've gained from working. That's assets you've gained from owning. That's the difference here, Nick. This is. You've studied politics. You've almost certainly a PPE grad. You know how Marxists view the difference between proletariat and bourgeois. This is very simple political economy. Stop bullshitting here, Nick.
It's worth more than when they bought it in the first place. It might be a newsagent or a florist. Is Labour going to increase the tax that working person pays in capital gains?
Nick, all of our plans are set out in a manifesto.
So they might.
Let me finish the sentence. All our plans are set out in the manifesto, fully costed, fully funded, and none of them, all launched yesterday, require tax increases over and above the ones we've set out, we are going to deal with the non-dom tax status. We are going to deal with the private equity loophole. We are going to deal with the tax break for private schools and the tax that we need to introduce or to extend on oil and gas companies. But none of our plans require any other tax rises.
No.
But
But plans change,
No.
just like Sir Keir Starmer's opinions
No,
change,
Nick.
events change,
Nick.
and it's possible, isn't it? If you're not ruling it out, people who've got a business maybe are going to sell their house and think it's never been charged with capital gains tax before. They've got to think, well, maybe these guys will need the money, like the experts say, and they'll come for me.
Nick, you let me explain. Unlike some Labour leaders that may have sat in a chair like this in an interview with you, my manifesto is about wealth creation. This is a party of wealth creation, of growth. And therefore, this boxing in...
Yeah, and wealth creation and growth means nothing unless you can tell us where that wealth creation and growth is going to go. Not that this manifesto is necessarily about wealth creation and growth. I don't think that it is. I think it's pretty weak on both of those things, to be fair. But we'll see anyway when it comes to be inputted into policy, because they'll win the election on the back of this manifesto with a pretty large majority. But who is going to be generating the wealth? Sure, you want to have this local power plant, very tiny amount of investment of the overall GB energy investment going to go in locally owned energy projects, right? That's fine. That's some local community wealth that you're creating there, and that's good. But the money that you're giving to just private businesses, like, unless you're going to properly talk about how we deal with the disparity between the high paid and the low paid, which you don't want to take action on, that's going to flow up to the rich. If you don't tax wealth, where the rich people have been taking all of these proceeds, pumping this liquidity into assets to increase those prices so they can only be afforded by rich people, that growth is going to flow up to the rich. And that wealth is going to be created for the rich. You've not shown me, at least not in the manifesto anyway, how this growth and this wealth that you've created is going to be this broad base that Rachel Reeves talked about in her Mays lecture. Like, I don't see it. I don't see where this is coming from.
That everybody is trying to do, particularly in recent days, that the only levers available to a Labour government or Labour Prime Minister is to sort of put up tax or pull down spending. I reject that. There is
Understood.
Growth is the lever that I intend to pull. That's why this plan is so carefully thought through.
Just want to ask you one more on this. You said something that caught people's attention the other day. You said you wouldn't use private healthcare, even if somebody was in real need.
Who cares?
It made some people think you're hostile to that. And when you and I spoke in a very personal interview that we did some time ago, you told me the story, a very moving story about your mother who's very ill, worked in the health service for a long time. And you told me, which I have to say surprised me at the time, that she gripped your hand and said to you, don't let your dad go private.
Yeah.
Are you hostile to people who go private? Do you think they're queue jumpers, that it's unfair?
No, I mean, in relation to my mum, she was obviously very ill for a lot of her life, and I was in a high dependency unit with her when we thought we were going to lose her many, many times. And that's why I relayed that to you. I'm not hostile in the slightest. I completely understand why people would go private. I know people who have because they wanted to have an operation more quickly to get back to work or to get back to something else. Just let me put it in my...
I'm asking for this reason.
No,
You're taxing private schools, or maybe you'll tax private health. He won't give an assurance on capital gains tax. Maybe he's coming for us sometime when things get a bit tough and the numbers don't add up.
Nick, just hear me out on this. I think I was asked, or at least one version of the question was, would you go private to, as it were, skip the waiting list to get an operation done? To which I said, no, that wouldn't be my instinct. I damaged my knee playing football a few years ago, meniscus.
What's funny, right, is that I fully agree with Starmer here. I absolutely 100% agree with Starmer. If you do get private healthcare, you are literally jumping the queue. You're pushing the queue back and getting in there first because you have access to additional wealth because of how rich you are. What's funny about this, though, is that this is an admission that there isn't spare capacity in the private health sector. It is, of course, all the same capacity with mostly the same physical facilities and the same staff, because most private healthcare staff are NHS workers who are doing overtime in the private sector. So by saying and admitting that he thinks that private healthcare users are jumping the queue, which I agree with, he's admitting that his healthcare plan of using the private sector to bring down the waiting list doesn't work Because it's true, it won't work because there's no spare capacity. But it's only because it's not spare capacity that it's jumping the queue. It's not taking the strain off the healthcare service, like a bunch of these private healthcare advocates will tell you. Well, it's great to use private healthcare because that means fewer people are using the NHS. No, they're using the same staff and the same facilities, just through a private avenue, which jumps the queue. He's admitting that his own healthcare policy doesn't work, which I find quite funny.
This was torn. I had a scan, I waited my turn, I went to the NHS, got it fixed, and I was back playing football. That's what happened. On acute care, because then the version of the question is, well, what about acute care? Emergency acute care. The NHS is the single best place if you've got an acute problem. And that is why even in the private hospitals, they refer into the NHS for acute care. If I had an acute care life-threatening issue for me or my family, the very best place to be is in the NHS.
Understood. I mentioned at the beginning of the interview that in 3 weeks' time, you could spend your first night in Downing Street. It's possible that you will get a call on that night, a call perhaps from the White House, asking you to join military action for an unforeseen crisis. I asked you if you were ready at the top. Are you ready to act like your predecessors, Tony Blair, Margaret Thatcher perhaps, to use British military power and to project that abroad?
I mean, everybody who wants to be Prime Minister should be prepared for military action. But you've prepared this question, Nick, saying, what if the White House calls you? To which the correct answer, of course, is, well, not if the White House says it. I'm not a dancing monkey. I don't just say how high when Joe Biden or Anthony Blinken or God forbid Donald Trump says start jumping. That's not how this is supposed to work. One of his pledges, let's remember, chat, one of his pledges is that military action should only be undertaken with a vote in the Commons, unless, of course, it strikes against Houthi militias in Yemen, to which he obviously went back on this pledge, otherwise known as a lie that he told before. So it'll be really interesting whether or not he brings this up right now, because I fully believe that he would be very ready to jump into bed with the Atlanticists and allow the White House to direct UK foreign policy, because we don't have independent foreign policy. And I reckon he'd probably bypass the Commons vote as well.
Ready to take whatever action we need to take to defend our country and to protect our country. That is the first duty of any government. It's why the Labour government back in the day signed the NATO treaty. It's why the Labour government back in the day was the first to go down the road of nuclear deterrent. So I'm ready to do whatever is necessary to defend our country.
Why did the other Keir Starmer, this Keir Starmer, say to the Labour Party to get elected that there'd be no more illegal wars, you said? I'll introduce a Prevention and Military Intervention Act. That doesn't sound like a Keir Starmer who's willing to take military
It's worth
action.
reading precisely what I said. I said we wouldn't be taking military action if there wasn't a sound legal basis for it. Well, that's absolutely right. That's why all governments now publish their legal advice, and it wouldn't be fair to put our armed forces in a position where they're risking their lives when we had not been assured ourselves that it was legal. The second thing I said is that we'd have to have an absolutely clear aim and outcome. So that is actually to codify what David Cameron actually did, which was to say, these are the basics, and we need the approval of Parliament if it's sustained for those basics.
No, you didn't say, but it's on the record that you opposed the Iraq war.
That's pretty well to codify the current situation.
Understood. You didn't say, but it's only fair to say.
I mean, it is true. I think that does marry up with this original pledge. I just don't believe him. Like, I just don't believe that he would only go to war if there was a sound legal basis. Like, I don't believe you, Keir.
Say that you marched against the Iraq war, you were clear where you were. There are some of your supporters, some people will no doubt be voting for you, who hope, particularly if Donald Trump's elected, and of course that's nothing to do with you, whether he is or he isn't, you know what they hope for? They want you to be like Hugh Grant in the movie. They want a Love Actually moment. Are you prepared to stand alongside an American president and publicly say, no, Mr. President?
Well, I'll deal with each situation as it arises. We don't simply do what any other country asks us to do. Every case has to be looked at on its merits. That is a very special relationship. It'll always be a special relationship with the US, whoever is the president. Obviously, it'll be up to the American people to decide who that is. And we and I, if we're elected into government, will deal with whoever is president of the United States.
What other topic? You've done money. We've talked about security.
I mean, it's a fine answer. I just don't believe you. Like, I just don't believe that you won't just do what the Americans tell you. But yeah, it's a good answer at the very least. If somebody asked in chat about if I have Booper as part of my job and if I use that, does that make you a bad person? Well, no, of course not. People, again, I don't believe there's ethical consumption under capitalism. I don't impugn individuals for individual choices a lot of the time. I blame policies, I blame systems. But it's worth pointing out specifically, if you do use private healthcare as part of your employment package, that is putting you ahead of the queue for people using the NHS. And I think it's worth, whether you think personally that it's worth it for you, knowing that that's what you're doing. I'm not going to morally impugn you if you want to do that. That's fine. The issue, of course, is that we should have a well-functioning enough NHS with enough capacity, with enough investment, without austerity, and with properly funded and properly paid doctors, nurses, and porters and workers, that it shouldn't have to bother being a choice. During the Blair administration, for example, when waiting lists were so low, people were complaining about not being able to delay their appointments. It wouldn't matter whether you used private healthcare or not, because the waiting lists were so short in the NHS that you weren't getting in the way of anybody. You weren't queue jumping because there was no queue to jump. And that's fine. Like, that's not a problem for me. The issue, of course, is it puts pay to this idea that you can use the private sector to bring down public sector waiting lists when you can't.
Security, we haven't talked about borders. No time to do it in detail. I simply want to ask you again, if you'll forgive me, about this. You see, in this, the Keir Starmer manifesto from 2019, it says, we need to defend migrants' rights and argue for free movement in the EU. Doesn't that tell you whose side you're really on when it comes to the debate about migration?
Well, let's take free movement. That was part and parcel of our membership of the EU. We've left the EU. Freedom of movement is over. And there's no...
But you said we should make the argument for freedom of movement as we leave the EU. So it's not about whether or not we have freedom of movement before. It's about whether we have it now. And you're now saying that you don't want it, and you said that we should have it in 2019. So you lied. That's a lie that you told.
Case for bringing it
You
back.
argued for it after Brexit.
I said as we were negotiating the exit from the EU, but that's done. We're out. We're not going back, and therefore we're not having freedom of movement.
I mean, you could renegotiate it. That's a thing you could do. I understand why you're not doing it. Again, this is clearly a political choice. I don't think we should be arguing for free movement as we leave the EU. I think it was a bad pledge. I think that we should accept the fact that people didn't want free movement, and we should find a new paradigm under a new economy as globalization stops. That's fine. But it doesn't mean you didn't lie, though.
Movement. What we need is fair rules, robust rules, properly applied, so that we can have the managed immigration that we need for our economy, but not lose control, which is the position under this government. We've got record numbers at the moment because we haven't got the skills.
The question was using a phrase you used in a speech.
Yeah,
but the most powerful question in politics, you said once, whose side are you on? And people think when they hear that, oh, I know whose side he's on. He's not on the side of us.
I'm on the side of working people. And I took the decision that after 4 election losses, there's a lot of analysis of the 2019 election.
It's very funny to me that Nick Robinson is continually taking the position that actually Keir Starmer is more left-wing than he lets on, and those pledges were the original thing that he means, and the manifesto is a lie. And I'm just like, what world do you live in, Nick? Of course he doesn't believe these things. Are you crazy? No, the pledges were the lies. I mean, I don't think he believes in anything. I think he'll just say whatever it takes to be able to get elected, and will let other people do it. He'll subcontract out policy to the Tony Blair Institute and to Labour Together and Pat McFadden and Shabana Mahmood and all of these people. He believes in nothing. He's an empty suit, an empty husk of individual who's allowed himself to be controlled by people in the background, shady figures in the background, who he subcontracts out his positions to. I don't think he has any genuine positions, but the idea that the current cadre, the current Politburo in charge of the party, want to defend the rights of migrants, that's complete nonsense. This idea that Nick Robinson is framing this as though actually he really is on the side of migrants, as if migrants aren't on the side of regular people, as if this is like some kind of fundamental material conflict between migrants and everybody else. That's some really disgusting politics that Nick Robinson is essentially taking as read in the way he's framed this question. Just your average BBC things, I guess.
Election loss, and I get that. But people forget the Labour Party had lost 4 elections in a row. We'd drifted too far from working people. And Nick, then I came into politics in 2015. By the time I was leader of the Labour Party, I'd been through 3 elections we'd lost. I then got thumped in Hartlepool about a year after I took over as leader. And I learned from experience, draw on experience. And my analysis was this party is too far from the country, and I'm prepared to do whatever change I need to do to put it in the right place. And that's what I've done with a steely determination. And I'm not going to...
And again, like, if you'd have just said that in the leadership election, it would have been fine. If you'd not lied in the leadership election, it would have been fine. Wouldn't have been a problem. If you just said, I understand that you guys think that migration is good, but you are out of step with the country. If we want to win elections, we need to try and move ourselves towards popular opinion on something like migration. Again, something that the Labour Party of old definitely agreed more with Keir Starmer than it does now. Like, Tony Blair is the pro-immigration Prime Minister who is kind of outside of regular old-school Labour Party values. And then it'll be fine. If it had won the election promising these things, not a problem. It's fine. You have this mandate. But he doesn't have that mandate because he lied in 2020.
Going to apologise for that.
Well, indeed. Let me ask you then to address a voter who's still got a worry, okay? Because you said there were people to persuade. What do you say to a voter who wonders if they can really trust a man who says he's changed from the Brexit-hating, tax-raising, industry nationalising, Corbyn-praising, self-declared socialist?
Why should we want these people's votes? If they hate everything we believe in, if they fundamentally ideologically disagree with us, they can't be convinced. If we change our positions to align with this person's anti-socialist, anti-liberal, anti-progressive views, then we haven't won an argument. They have won the argument. We have not created a convert. People always talk about this idea, oh, the left wants to identify traitors and the right wants to win converts. And I think this is a good criticism of the left. The left do a circular firing squad all the time, and they don't want to be able to win people over and try and have those discussions and have those arguments. Fundamentally, an excellent criticism of the state of the modern left. We are inwardly thinking, we are insular, we don't entertain disagreement, and we try and weed each other out in purity testing rather than trying to build a broad base. That's correct. Excellent criticism of the left. But that's about selling our ideas to other people to win them over. Whereas this voter, who fundamentally doesn't disagree with the current position of the Labour Party, is just worried that they are saying it dishonestly. If we, as leftists, just adopt all of these people's positions, they've won. We are the converts. We've not converted anybody. They have converted us into being conservative. And that's what's happened to Keir Starmer. He has converted the Labour Party into a conservative party. He has not converted the public to being Labour supporters. It's as simple as that. And that's not purity testing for me to say so. It's not a purity test for me to expect a democratic socialist party to not abandon democratic socialism.
Went to work in Northern Ireland, and I said I would, with others, change the police service of Northern Ireland to make sure that it gained the confidence of both communities. So I said what I...
He's going to say, after this, I then became head of the Crown Prosecution Service. I said I would change it as Director of Public Prosecutions, and I changed it. He's going to say it, I promise you, chat. 100%.
I would do, and I changed it. I then led the Crown Prosecution Service. I said I would change it to make sure that it better protected victims, particularly in sexual cases. I said I'd do it.
It's too easy. It's too easy, chat. The man's a fucking robot. The man is just an NPC. Press E to talk. I used to be a warrior like you, but then I took an arrow in the knee. My responses are limited. You must ask the right questions.
I did it. I came in and led the Labour Party. I said I would change it to put it back in a position to win elections. And over 4.5 years, I've done it with a steely determination. So every time I've said, gone into a leadership role and said, this is what I'm going to do, I then delivered it. So I stand on my record. And
No. When you became leader of the Crown Prosecution Service, you said that you would change it, and you did. When you became leader of the Labour Party, you told people the 2017 manifesto was a foundational document. We needed to make the moral case for socialism, that you believed in taking the momentum of 2017 and 2019 and making it electable. You did not say you wanted to change the Labour Party into becoming a Conservative party. You did not say a single fucking thing about changing the Labour Party into a Conservative party. You didn't say anything of the sort, right? Again, if you'd have just admitted it, if you'd have just said that's what you wanted to do when you were trying to get elected, nobody would have an issue. You would have that mandate and you would be right to implement that mandate. You have no fucking mandate for this shit by just lying. Again, because the man's lied. The man just absolutely lied. He just lies. That's all he does.
And I have done this for a purpose, which is to ensure the Labour Party can win an election, bring about the change that's needed for millions of people in this country.
Sir Keir Starmer, thank you for talking to me.
Bellend. Jesus Christ, that was difficult. It was a difficult watch, wasn't it, chat?
That is a disgrace.
I agree. It is a disgrace. Also, somebody super chatted whilst my notifications. Sorry, somebody dropped bits whilst my notifications were off. So I do apologise. It was. Where's my Twitch thing?
They're having a disco.
Let me read out your you spent bits. That means you have to get a message sent out. So I'm gonna read out your message because that's what people pay. You've literally paid money for it. A whole $1. If we want to win this election, we need to do xenophobia again. Literally, it's the pixelated boat meme. It's, you know, thing is, the problem with this politics is all about compromise. Okay, so compromise with the left. God, no, I meant compromise with racists. Like, it was incredibly rough watch, yeah, I agree. Oh yeah, this is an incredibly, like, blackpilling election, Ling Ling, you're absolutely right. I have literally zero hope for the government that's coming in. You met Pixelated Boat once. Are they Australian? I mean, his approval rating is already very low. Stop your campaign as the momentum for a runaway freight train. Thank you for the 10 gifted, Phil. Appreciate the support. It's unsettling that he's using women and VAWG to sell himself when not only are convictions nothing, he lied to beat women to be leader. He steps on women to get ahead. Uses you. I agree. I agree. I think he does do that. I think he absolutely does do that. It was funny as well to see somebody on Twitter saying, you have to vote Starmer because the Conservatives have been so bad for women and girls. It doesn't matter that Labour doesn't know what a woman is. There are so many other issues that are more important. Yes, it's also bad that Labour are pro-trans when they're not. But you have to vote for them anyway. It was funny that she was a TERF trying to get you to vote Labour, even though they weren't TERFy enough for her, for all of these promises he's made about violence against women and girls, which of course he's also going to fail on as well. Like, where's the funding for the court system?
Fucking neoliberalism.
Like, one of the big things in this big thread about the failure of the Conservative government for the lives of women, which is true. Like, the government absolutely has failed women, and not just on things like sexual violence, not just on like the social role of women or anything like that. On austerity as well. Austerity, the biggest it hit women more than it hit men. Austerity did. It's why women are more left wing amongst young people as well. Like, women were massively hit by the effects of austerity and the access to the social resources that they needed. This is 100% true. Is Starmer going to fix any of these things? No. They've promised they're not going to fix these things. Yeah, welcoming in Natalie Elphicke, of all people. The person who defended her husband after he was done for being a fucking sex pest. Peter McBride says you've got 4 trains to Formby tomorrow. I thought that said 4 trains to Femboy. I have to say, but no worries, Peter. I hope you sleep well, and I hope your trains to Femboy are not too long and an easy journey. You made the mistake of listening to Sheila Fogarty this week. She couldn't accept the trans issues weren't a big issue, re the election. Yeah, these fucking turfs, their brains are broken. Their brains are like fucking 7 journalists. 7 journalists with a chip on their shoulder. 7 journalists like across like the Guardian and the Observer and the Times and the Mail and the Telegraph, whatever. Like an absolute handful of fucking like highly paid Fleet Street hack wankers who don't have a single problem with the cost of living crisis. You don't have to care about the fact that austerity has destroyed the lives of people in this country. The cost of living crisis is really biting because these people live charmed silver spoon existences with no problems at all of their own, no real problems. Thinking that, oh, well, I didn't have any real problems, so the trans stuff is really big for me. Because, you know, if they had real problems, they'd be talking about other problems. And they've made it a problem for everybody else. Like Sonia Soda with article after fucking article of here's why the transes are bad. Right? And I'm like, yeah, the only reason you're writing about this is because you need to write about the war against the disabled, the disgusting nature of child poverty, because you don't have to deal with it, because you're fucking highly paid journalist hack wankers. Like, yeah, of course you care more about trans people. Do you don't have any real fucking problems?
Because I'm literally a communist.
What problems does Sheila Fogarty have in a highly paid LBC job, you know, hoovering up those global media bucks? Like, yeah, she ain't got a real problems, has she? She's not she's not having problems affording to feed and clothe her children. So yeah, she's got time to worry in her non-job, speaking into a microphone for 3 hours a day. She's got time to worry about what's happening in other people's pants. Yeah, she's fucking disgusting, like, awful human she is. The Sunak interview was earlier this week, Matt. It's the reaction's up on my YouTube channel. I'll have you know, Sheila has a very real problem with having to pay more tax because of IR35 rules. She keeps reminding everybody. Well, I'm assuming she's going to vote Reform UK to get rid of IR35 then. It's part of their big plan anyway, to make life better for the self-employed. Or for independent contractors. My brother used to be in a band with the drummer from Spiritualized. Fun fact. Labour is simply a vehicle for Starmer to end up heading into some global institution such as the IMF. I mean, you know, he's already got the Trilateral Commission under his belt. You know, got to catch them all at the end of the day. James O'Brien is always saying he's well paid. I mean, he's a minority in the LBC people. Yeah, but again, like they are all well paid at LBC, and it's why they don't have to. That's why they don't have to concern themselves with the cost of living crisis. So many contractors in banks used to just pay themselves in dividends and were earning 2 to 3 times as much as permanent employees, paying a higher percentage of tax. Yeah, it's fucking criminal, isn't it? It's stupid. The LBC isn't like right wing. Like, I think they've got a good mix of like right wingers and left wingers on the program. But they are all very firmly pro-Israel, apart from JOB, because now they've got rid of Sangita. But it's just the right-wing wankers that they have on LBC are like real wankers. And like, not in that they're necessarily that right-wing. Like, I think the most right-wing they've got as a presenter is Nick Ferrari. And he's not even like that bad as far as right-wingers go. I think he's a bellend, but he's not like a Douglas Murray type figure, you know. He's not somebody from The Spectator. He's not Fraser Nelson or some shit, or someone from the IEA. He's not like part of the Goon Squad. Like, it's not, you can do like worse than Nick Ferrari. It's almost like Sheila Fogarty is the worst because she's clearly like a capital L liberal, and those are the people, especially comfortable ones, who get on the turf train so quickly. Yeah, it's true. They did used to have Camilla Tominley and Nigel Farage, yeah. Who's left wing at LBC? Ollie Dugmore. I mean, when I say left wing, I don't mean like leftists. I mean left of centre. I mean, you've got Ollie Dugmore. You've got Lewis Goodall on there as well. You got Natasha Devon. And Matt Fry's been pretty good at being on the liberal left, yeah. Norrie Smith, will take care. Am I in a band? No, I'm not in a band, unfortunately. By the way, if you're enjoying the content, you can subscribe on Twitch for $4.99 or for free with Twitch Prime. By linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, gets you one free subscription every single month, courtesy of Jeff Bezos at no cost to yourself, which gets you ad-free viewing over on Twitch, as well as access to my animated and static emotes in Twitch chat. If you want to drop a message, I have text-to-speech turned on now, thankfully. On Twitch, for 100 bits, gets you text-to-speech. You're going to message. If you're going to message you want me to read out over on YouTube, I read out all super chats regardless of value. If you want a message read out on YouTube there. You can become a member now on YouTube, which is only 99p. It's cheaper than a can of Red Stripe. That gets you access to my archive live streams, gets you access to my static emotes in YouTube chat and in the YouTube comments section, and as well as my archive live streams. And that's only 99p. It's only cheaper than a can of Red Stripe. And if you want to gift memberships, that's the best way to support the channel. If you have a message you want to read, if you don't have a message you want to read out on YouTube, instead of super chatting, that equivalent number of super chats as that equivalent amount of super chat as gifted memberships is better for the stream, as it boosts the content, boosts the profile, boosts the algorithm, and allows me access to more emotes as well. So yeah, if you want to support the stream, gifting memberships on YouTube is the best way to do it. Never expected, but always appreciated. Carol Vorderman is an LBC, isn't she? I mean, yeah, but she's basically just a anti-Tory person at this point. Like, I don't think that Carol Vorderman is like a lefty. I know, right? It's depressing, isn't it, Batphone? And JOB is like, I think JOB is like on the liberal left. I think he's on James O'Brien is absolutely left of centre. The issue with James O'Brien is that he's 5 years late. Like, he's literally 5 years late. Every single time. He was 5 years late on the Israel-Palestine stuff. He was 5 years late on austerity. He was 5 years late on the problems with conservatism. He was 5 years late on private schools. Like, he's always behind the ball because he takes his cues from other people. He's not an intellectually curious person. Like, I think his heart is in the right place. I just think he's an intellectually incurious buffoon with a strongly overinflated sense of self-importance and a belief that he's always right. Like, I have a sense of self-importance. I've got a fucking YouTube channel. Like, of course, I'm up myself, but like, I admit that I'm up myself. And what I always try and do is ensure that I am engaging with contrary opinions to know that I am solid in the beliefs that I hold, in understanding why I believe what I believe, the basis behind those beliefs, and whether or not I think it has proper utility. I'm always scrutinising what I believe. James O'Brien, though, is just the most kind of remember his calls with Brexit voters? He was never trying to understand their position. He was never trying to find out what they believed and why they believed it. He just wanted to dunk. He just wanted to dunk on people. And that, I find, was very intellectually incurious of James O'Brien. And that's why I don't like him. Yeah, he does live in an FBPE bubble, that's true. He banned the use of the term supermajority yesterday. I mean, if it's in parliamentary elections, then, you know, I guess it makes sense. You can't really have a supermajority in Parliament, but I think as a broad phrase, it means it's fine. But oh, Paul, that's a good shout, actually. Yeah. I mean, literally, the fact that James O'Brien literally wrote a book called How to Be Right just shows you how up his own arse he is. Like, it's his attitude that I hate. not necessarily more than the positions he holds. He says austerity is bad now. He says austerity led to Brexit. I'm like, yeah, you're fucking 5 years late, mate. Whilst you're talking about how to be right, we were the ones who were telling you what the problem was 5 years before when you were dismissing us as anti-Semites and Trotskyists. And now he's the one getting called an anti-Semite for saying maybe Netanyahu doing a genocide is a bad thing. Like, it's just funny watching it all blow up in his face. Where would we, should we are, oh, it's fine. So in chat, where to focus our attention next? Lump in with the Greens, wait for the next Enough is Enough campaign, or more local issue organising? I think it's really important, Matt. I think you've raised a really important point here, which is that, sure, we hate Labour, we're not voting for Labour, we're out of the Labour bubble, we are divested from the Labour movement more broadly with regards to electoral politics. And we've accepted this. Like, we've accepted what this is. But I really want to ensure that not just people in my chat who are politically engaged, but people more broadly who are also disillusioned with Labour as a political party and the Labour movement electorally, don't check out from the Labour movement at large. The single biggest political change that you can do in your life to try and get things to be better, to try and make the world a better place, to try and fight for the interests of people like us, to join a trade union. That's the thing that you should immediately do. You shouldn't get rid of your trade union membership just because you're not linked up to the Labour Party. Electoral politics is not the be-all and end-all of how we engage with politics. The politics doesn't stop on July the 5th. The politics continues forever. Like in the David Mitchell sketch, the football goes on forever, right? And the first thing you should do is join a trade union. I think you should join the Green Party. You should join us in campaigning for local elections, for municipal elections, for the potential base that we need to build to challenge Labour from the left when it comes to the next general election. It doesn't stop. We should be preparing for the next election as soon as July the 5th rolls round as well. But what we absolutely need to ensure that people do immediately, rather than thinking that nothing can change, the world will never be better, and the Labour Party in power have shut us out of politics forever. No, it does not stop. You need to join a union. Everybody who's watching, I'll put this on TikTok later. If you're watching this at home, TikTok viewers, you need to join a union. You should join a trade union, right? It protects your rights at work. It will ensure that you can get as many people together to collectively bargain if you then get your union recognised at work. It's a way in which you connect with other working people to coordinate politically, to coordinate with your organising. You can use trade unions to be able to build communities with people, to be able to be part of your community.
I'm actually very right-wing, and I love
to have things like credit unions that people can be part of. Right? There are loads of things that a trade union will do for you, and it's the best way to get politically organised so that we are ready. We have the movement built, that we are ready for the next election. We're ready for the next municipal elections, the next local elections, the next general election. There might be a random snap election at some point. If we just check ourselves out of politics forever, your landlord doesn't check out of politics. Your boss doesn't check out of politics. If you check out of politics, then you're letting your boss and your landlords control politics. And again, the best way to ensure that you have a political voice when there are no elections to decide elected officials is to join a political grouping of people who share your material interests as working people, and that grouping is a trade union. So if you're watching this, the first thing you should do, close TikTok, close YouTube, close Twitch, stop watching me, unsubscribe, and go to tuc.org.uk/join union, find your trade union and join. If you're a low earner, it can be as low as £5 a month to join a trade union, and it's the best community that you need to fight for your interests outside of electoral politics. Because again, it does not stop when you vote. The work does not finish as soon as you vote in the election, and liberals think that it does. Liberals are too busy going, we have to vote out fascism. No, you have to fight fascism. You have to fight conservatism. You have to fight the power of capital. And that does not stop as soon as you cast your ballot. It continues. And I will repeat it for the millionth time. The way you continue that fight is by joining a trade union. And do it today. Do it right now. Do it. We need a united left after July the 5th. Otherwise, Farage will fill that hole. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you for the links early, Dave. I appreciate you. If only it was possible to gift union memberships on behalf of me. Absolutely. Because, Trade union membership in this country has continually declined, even though Mick Lynch seems to be like all over our TV screens. You can't stop for seeing Mick Lynch on BBC Politics Live, like the big union moment where the nurses went on strike for the first time in living memory. And for the first time since the miners' strike, when public opinion was against working people, the first time since the mess of the 70s, people were behind us. People supported trade unions. They supported the strikers. They supported working people. The pandemic changed the paradigm. The pandemic taught people that working people are the backbone of our society. As Mick Lynch has said on Sky News, working people build the wealth of our civilization, and we do not get the just proceeds of the wealth that we create because our interests are not served by politicians. The balance between labour and capital is massively out of whack. And that rebalancing has to come from organisation. It will have to come from forces outside of politicians who can be bought by private interests. And again, you collectively bargain, you collectively organise within your trade union. And people recognise this. The country would have collapsed if regular people didn't go out doing their workhouse deliveries, didn't go out doing stuff for Uber Eats, didn't go out to Tesco and stack the shelves so that the people could be able to eat the food that they needed when they couldn't leave their house. Working people carried our country through the pandemic, and it changed. It changed how our country looked at the labour market. It changed how our country looked at people who work. It changed when the nurses went on strike after being clapped, after we clapped for the nurses during the pandemic. Did the nurses pay their bills with claps? No. They were being screwed over by our government. They were being failed by our elected representatives. And we couldn't vote them out to get the nurses better pay. There was only one way that they could get better pay, and it was through collective action, through going on strike. After warning the government that they would, they went on strike, they collectively bargained, and they got a pay. And they got a pay arrangement. They managed to negotiate a pay deal, which had bonuses and an increase and an uplift in pay. And they would not have got it if they'd have just waited until the next election to replace the Tories with the Labour Party. Not that the Labour Party would necessarily benefit nurses, but anyway, regardless, they fought and they won. Unite the Union fought for hotel porters to no longer be employed by a private contractor. They won through collective action to be brought back in-house as a publicly employed porter, not indeed as a private subcontractor. You didn't have to wait until we voted in another government. We fought for collective action and we won. And people backed us. People backed the trade unions. People overwhelmingly backed striking nurses and striking doctors because they saw that these people put their lives on the line for the country during the pandemic. Yet still, after all of this moment, after the trade union had a new moment, after the pandemic, trade union membership still declining. Amongst under 25s, trade union membership is at 9%. 9% in this country. That's abysmal. The number of people in a trade union has been decreasing ever since the 1980s, and the population is bigger, and the number is still dropping. This is a problem. Again, I really cannot impress upon people who are watching this later on. If you're a young person, if you're a 19-year-old, if you're a 20-year-old, for example, you've just entered the world of work, right? I get it. No one's explained to you what a trade union even is. You might not even know what a trade union is. You might not know that it's a trade union you can join. You don't need to have a recognised union in your workplace to pay your union dues and then use that as a method so that you have somebody who can come in and be part of your disciplinary process to protect you from your employer. To have access to free legal advice and legal representation if you need to take your employer to court for bad business practices. You do not get that if you're not part of a trade union. Of course, you want to have as many people in your union in your workplace as possible to try and get your union recognised to collectively bargain. But that doesn't happen out of nowhere. The very first step, as I've said 1,000 times now, the very first step to getting people in your workplace together and organised and having a union recognised is you joining a trade union yourself. That is the first step. And if you wait for somebody else to do it, it won't get done. You need to take that first step. You need to become part of the movement. You need to ensure that you're protecting yourself and convincing everybody else they can protect themselves as well. Because if we don't, the gap between labour and capital will continue to grow. It will continue to get bigger and bigger. The only way of redressing that, in the absence of politicians fighting our corner, which we won't have, because those same capitalists now fund the Labour Party, they now pay Keir Starmer's bills. The only people who we're going to be able to defend ourselves is ourselves. The only people we can trust, the only people we can count on to be there defending us is us. And so we need to collectively protect ourselves. Again, and the way you do that is by joining a trade union. Sharon Graham has had Sir Keith on notice for 4 years now. He still doesn't take any notice. Union dues are a third of Tory donors to Labour now. I mean, you can if you join a trade union that's affiliated to Labour, you can choose not to contribute to the money they give to the Labour Party. It's a choice to do that. And again, like, yeah, the weekends, unions, maternity pay, trade unions, the work, child labour laws, won through trade unions. What would you suggest for a sole trader like you? Just go to tuc.org.uk/join union. Use the tool to search for a union that can represent you. I understand that, of course, as a sole trader, it's not going to be there for like disputes or whatever it might be, but you can still protect you from the state if the state fail you and you need legal representation against something the state has been doing against you, right? That's worth doing. And also, unions can fight to protest legislation, can build movements to combat the government when it comes to legislation. When it came to the pension law in France, for example, the biggest group who were there protesting the pension law was the CGT, was the General Workers' Trade Union. They were the ones organising the protest. They were the ones out there getting people in their millions to descend onto the streets of France to protest Macron's pension reforms. And whether you are a sole trader or not, you may not have an employer to bargain with. Being part of that group, that organisation that's there to be able to fight against government policy that negatively impacts workers, it's all being part of the movement that's important. See, I'm a sole trader now. I guess I'm technically a subcontractor, an independent contractor of YouTube and Twitch, whatever. But part of my trade union membership is to protect myself from them, but also to be part of the bigger movement of the trade. I don't really use my union membership for much anymore. I really don't. But I recognise that being part of the union is important. Being part of the CWU is important. Contributing to the strike funds that people in the Royal Mail would need. Contributing to people like the representatives that fight for my rights when it comes to having consultations with the government. Like, this is all important. This is all part of the process. Four-day work weeks in the Green Party manifesto. You know where to vote. Right, let's watch some more content. I did talk about the it was in Ashfield, not Mansfield, but yes, I did watch the Moya video that she did in Ashfield. And again, like, what was interesting as well is that despite all of the funny stories that I've heard about Jason Zadrozny in Ashfield, it was very funny that he actually had the best point of view. Like, he said, I campaign for real people in my constituency because they've been lied to. The immigrants are causing their problems, when no, it's Whitehall, it's Westminster, cutting local budgets, austerity stripping away the fabric of society that's caused the demise of the high street in Ashfield, right? That's what I want to fight against, and these people have been lied to. So Jason Zadrozny, he has my support, despite everything. You have been watching for a year, Davinia. I've very much enjoyed your continued contributions. Thank you for sticking around. Right, Right, let's watch this video. Let's watch some Reform UK stuff. We can talk about Reform UK. Let's have a look at what Reform UK is saying.
This is the Deputy Leader of Reform UK.
Right, let's just make sure that it's not in like fucking potato vision. There we go.
This is the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Dr. David Bull, who joins me live on the line. Hi there. Could you not operate your video, bless your heart?
No, I couldn't, Christo. A very good. Is it afternoon? Yeah, good afternoon. No, I can't. So I didn't have one of our creative technical gurus, you see, to help. So no.
Bless your little heart. Never mind. You're all right on the phone then. You know what you're doing with the telephone, all right?
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
Look, I mean, you sound like you're in good spirits, but it does sound like it's a good day for reform, doesn't it? With this latest poll, you are the opposition party.
Well, absolutely.
I mean, no, they're not. They one poll had them 1 point ahead. A bunch of the other polls from the other polling companies have them like 8 points behind. Like, they're not the opposition yet.
Absolutely. Look, it's been an incredible few hours. I was with Nigel last night in Manchester, and obviously our party election broadcast went out, and I think it caused a lot of comments, actually, because, of course, we ran our PEB, and it was just the word saying Britain is broken and Britain needs reform. And people were saying, well, is my television broken because there was no sound? On the back of that, and, of course, the huge number of comments that we got on social media, then, of course, the poll came out. Now, we are now at an inflection point. This is a really serious point. And we thought this moment would come, but actually it has come slightly earlier than even we imagined it would. And this is game-changing, as you rightly say. We are now the opposition.
All right, but a lot of people hear that...
Yes, he is a medical doctor, yeah, absolutely. But again, look, the platform is really silly. I'm not going to go over it now. We'll wait till the manifesto and we'll do a proper deep dive into what Reform UK are looking at. But this idea again that we're now the opposition, no, you're really not. Like, not only will you not win, not only are you going to be winning fewer seats than the Conservative Party. On top of that is literally one poll that you're still ahead in, and with one set of methodologies. A bunch of other polls have you way behind the Conservative Party, but they've jumped upon this, and of course the media love a good story. They love to, ooh, look, we've got this Reform UK pulling ahead. This is a media story that all of the channels can talk about. I'm like, it was one poll once, right? Come to me when every poll is saying it, and then I'll believe you. Like, I get it. I get why they're running with it. I get why Reform UK want to broadcast it everywhere, and that's fine, right? It's that they're a political party. It's within their interest to take data that is good for them and share it everywhere. But the fact that the media are giving this so much time, and not just like the meme stations like GB News and Talk TV, but Times Radio and LBC and the BBC and ITV and Channel 4, they're all giving this perceived legitimacy, despite the fact it's just one singular poll from one singular pollster.
That Reform would be opposition, and are not happy about that. They believe that your party is still the party that is either xenophobic or racist, or some have even gone so far as to call it the far right and fascist. Now, before I let you respond to that, I just want to let you hear what Michael Heseltine had to say about the rise of Reform. This was on this station a couple of weeks ago, and then I'll let you respond, David.
It's a little strong, though, to suggest that Reform are a racist party, surely. I mean, they have a belief that the UK can survive outside Europe. They've got policies they'd like to implement on immigration. It might be robust, it might be different, it might be genuine change. It's not racist, though, is it?
I mean, there isn't necessarily, if you don't want immigration, that you're racist, right? Absolutely. And I think that was something that was bandied about really often during the Brexit debacle that really kind of undermined a bunch of people with some genuine concerns, right? Like, literally, I mean, I know that it's a meme talk about genuine concerns, but there were, and I think they're bogus concerns, and people have been lied to about whether or not immigration is a necessity or not, and the damage reducing immigration will do to our economy, but that's a separate story. But we've all seen what Reform UK candidates say. We've all seen the Reform UK stuff about we should have been neutral in the Second World War, and the person who said that women should get denied NHS care. We've all seen the kind of weirdo reactionary types who stand for Reform UK. They certainly represent a certain sector of society, if I put it that way.
Look, you know them when you see them. I know racism when I see it. This is pure bigotry, anti-immigrant, racist propaganda. That's what it's all about. And the whole psychology of their campaign is to reinforce those very unattractive human instincts.
Okay, anti-immigrant racist propaganda.
And when a Tory, right, when a Tory grandee is saying that to you, you take that shit seriously.
Well, the words of Michael Heseltine, obviously, very senior Tory of years gone by. What's your reaction to what he has to say?
What utter twaddle. Honestly, excuse me. And what utter twaddle, Christo. This is from the arch Remainer, of course, who's still very bitter about the Brexit referendum result. Look, it's absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, you're all Thatcherites as well, so's Heseltine. I thought you liked free markets. Like, I thought you liked trade. I thought you liked capitalism. That's a neoliberalism. That's what the EU single market represents, frictionless trade. Very, very weird they seem to be so anti-single market, but whatever. What genuine concerns are there exactly? Like, increasing population, what it does to things like infrastructure and housing costs, for example. Like, the concerns are genuine. It's just that the solution is not stop immigration, because that will kneecap the economy. It is build houses and infrastructure with all of the additional tax revenue you get from all these extra working people you get in the country.
I really take issue with this idea that we're far right. We're not. We're right of centre. We're actually a true conservative party. What we have right now is high tax, high regulation, low growth. People are really struggling with the cost of living. That's what we want to address. And actually, we've been really, really clear. If I'm in a party, and you know me really well, I would never be associated with a party if it was full of racists and bigots. And we've been really clear. If anyone spreads any sort of hatred, or indeed if they're anti-Semitic or if they promote violence, they are out. We do not want to associate with people like that.
Why do you think then that Reform has had to drop these candidates? We've had these couple of candidates you've had to Reform that dropped because they made these racist comments on social media. There was a story out just yesterday saying nearly 1 in 10 Reform candidates is a friend, apparently, on Facebook with a British fascist leader. There was also the person from your party that said that sort of Hitler should have been negotiated with. What is your reaction to that happening, and why do you think those people are associated with Reform, gravitate?
It's also worth pointing out as well that what Reform UK really is now is like the mainstream conspiracy theory party. They're the mainstream conspiracy theory party at this point, which is that they support conspiracies about, cultural Marxism and about the World Economic Forum and like the Marxist teachers indoctrinating your children into genderism or whatever. They talk about all of these kind of crackpot conspiracy theories, which aren't a litmus test for whether or not somebody is racist or not. But there is a lot of underlying racism there. Like the cultural Marxism stuff is actually a Nazi-era conspiracy theory about Jewish intellectuals trying to undermine the West. And a lot of these people do feel like the West is in jeopardy. A lot of the anti-cultural Marxism, anti-World Economic Forum kind of conspiracy theory scaremongering is about this idea of the decline of the West. This is what they think is happening. For example, like the George Soros conspiracies is about the decline of the West. And I'm like, no, the West isn't in decline because of weirdo people in the back, the West isn't in decline because of a weird cabal of people trying to destroy it. It's because of neoliberalism, mate. The economic system these people support.
To Reform.
Okay, so as you know, Richard and I have been working very hard over the last 3 years to get candidates in place. We have a due diligence process which all candidates have to go through, and it's a really thorough vetting process. Now, when the Prime Minister called the election, of course, it caught us on the hop, and it caught many other parties on the hop as well. So we had to expedite some of that. And so there are some candidates in there that
from an Australian perspective, they're Clive Palmer party, but British. Except, I mean, that's true. They are literally the Clive Palmer party, except Nigel Farage is far more charismatic and much better at politics than Clive Palmer is. And indeed, Farage may be a fuckhead, but he's not a fatty McFuckhead, which of course Clive Palmer is. And he can't sue me for that, because I'm in England.
That are not right, and we've taken action when we have found that. But actually, just in terms of people liking posts, Sure, many years ago, maybe they liked a post. It doesn't mean, and you've got to remember, many of our candidates, actually, I think 400 of them, are new to politics. So, in fact, they may have done something in the past, but for me, it's much more about intent. What do they intend by any comment? What sort of person are they? And actually, what we're trying to do is to take politics to the grassroots and to say, look, actually, if you want change in this country and you believe in it, then you have to put yourself forward. So, look, I reiterate the point, actually, and all parties have had the same problem. Even the Conservative Party, if you actually look at the Green Party, 20 of them have been caught out for espousing anti-Semitic.
One of their anti-Semitic statements, by the way, was describing America and Israel as terrorists. Yeah, that's that. You can't criticize America now. That's anti-Semitism, guys.
Comments. So all parties have a similar problem, but we will take firm action if we find any candidates have broken any of our rules.
But do you think that reform gets a harder time because of the your immigration policy? I was going to actually, I nearly fell in the trap there saying your anti-immigrant stance, and I don't think you have an anti-immigrant stance. You have a net zero cap on immigration, meaning no more coming in than leave every year. But because of that stance, do you think that you have to actually be more careful than other parties?
No, we're saying the unsayable, aren't we? So we've had 2.5 million people coming here in the last 2 years. You cannot get schools, you cannot get hospitals, we can't see a GP. The whole country is falling apart.
Yeah, because of austerity. Again, you also support cutting a load of the government budgets that's necessary to be able to put the money into increasing these public services that are so strained because of the increase in the population without that investment. You want to cut 5% from every government department to pay for corporation tax cuts. Like, that's not going to fix the infrastructure problems. It's going to make the infrastructure problems worse, right? We can have net zero immigration for like a decade. And if you cut huge amounts out of public budgets that are necessary for this infrastructure investment, they're still going to get worse, David. This is not, again, they're trying to sell you an austerity problem as an immigration problem. They're trying to sell you a false premise. It's the Tories managed to sell it for you the entire time as well. Again, because they wanted to prey on your people's insecurities to justify their Thatcherite, neoliberal, public sector sell-off austerity bollocks. And then because they're trying to get you to blame it on immigrants rather than indeed on central government.
There are far too many people coming into the country.
Isn't the net number lower than that, though? Isn't the net number about half of that?
The net number was 745,000, 745,000 people the year before last. Now it's 685,000.
So it's about 1.3 million we've actually had settle here, as opposed to the 2.5 million you just said.
It's about 1.5 million. I believe it's about 4 million since 2010, 4.5 million since 2010. But the point is, the rate of change has been so dramatic. The infrastructure cannot cope. Now, immigration is the lifeblood of this country. Look, we're all immigrants, actually, into this country, pretty much. And so immigration is a really good thing, but it has to be smart immigration. One of the things we're most worried about is the companies, big corporates, over-reliance on cheap labour and importing people into this country and depriving...
This is a really interesting dog whistle, right? This idea that they're coming to take your jobs. Like, that's not actually happening. There may be like certain sectors, but you can protect that by using trade union bargaining rights, by having a floor across sectors to protect people who might be in certain sectors affected by immigration, but broadly, immigration doesn't necessarily undercut anybody's wages because the labour demand in the country is proportional to the amount of demand, aggregate demand for goods and services in the country, which is of course proportional to the population size. The issue we have, as I've said before, is our population pyramid that's very top heavy. We have a lot of retirees or soon to be retirees once a decade passes and the boomer generation start retiring, and these people are then going to stop producing goods and services. They're going to stop being productive, they're going to start being unproductive, and they're going to need pension provision. And if we have fewer workers, because again, the proportion of the population that's going to be retired is therefore going to be increasing relative number of working people, the tax base is going to shrink. And either taxes are going to go up or pensions are going to get reduced. And that's a problem with the population pyramid. Immigration is necessary to increase the number of working people, number of working age people, to offset this glut of future retirees. That's the problem that we have. And no one is being truthful and honest about what the political and economic ramifications it will be if we reduce immigration. That's the problem. If you don't want to have immigration, whatever, get fucking then. Start having sex. Start pumping out some children. Because if you don't do it, then we'll have population decline and economic decline. I don't care. I'm happy to have immigration to fill those gaps. I am not tied to this idea that a population has to be of a certain kind of cultural background, whatever. But the important part is that we are not being truthful with people about the impacts, about the economic impact of reduced migration.
In their own countries of that labour. Why are we not training our own people? We've got 9 million.
Because they're sick. They're on long-term sick because the NHS has been underfunded. And you also want to underfund the NHS for tax cuts. That doesn't work either. They're working in the same labour market. Again, the labour market that will expand as the population expands. This is all just complete nonsense economics.
People who are economically inactive in this country. We've got 5 million people on out of work benefit. I want to see young people in this country being given a chance, being given hope and aspiration, and training them.
But
our hope hasn't been taken away because there's too many immigrants. Our hope has been taken away because neoliberal Thatcherites like you took away the hard-won workers' rights, the hard-won defined benefit pensions, the hard-won proper and correct distribution of resources between labour and capital in this country, and allowed us to become a gigantic rentier, bastardised landlord economy in which work pays less and capital returns more. That's what you people wanted. You wanted our country to be run in favour of capitalists, and workers have lost out. Young people, young workers have lost out because of this. Your deregulatory economic policy, your privatisation economic policy took away our rights. It took away our wages. It took away access to good workers' conditions. That's what you did. That's what's screwing over young people, not the fact that we have some people here with non-English surnames.
But if reform's policy, and we've been talking about tax a lot in the last hour, reform's policy is to have a higher tax threshold for everyone so that you don't start paying tax till I think it's about £20,000.
20,000, yeah.
You also, though, want to have this net zero on immigration and a full training programme for people to be trained here in the UK to do the jobs that we have, I guess, seen as foreign jobs, outsourced over the last few years. On paper, many people would say that sounds very worthy, but if you're going to have this low tax economy, how on earth are you going to pay for all of that? A lot of people are pointing out that reforms...
And again, like, how are you going to get people off of the hospital waiting lists so they're out of being long-term sick, which is the vast majority of the people who are economically inactive? They're not unemployed, they're long-term sick. It's out-of-work benefits is their umbrella term, but it's obfuscation. It's obfuscation away, deliberately, so that you think they're all people unemployed on benefits just lounging around doing nothing, like people try and smear young people in this country as being lazy layabouts who don't want to earn their keep, which is fundamentally untrue and quite frankly ageist, if you want to coin such a phrase, when the reality is most of the people who are economically inactive are off work sick because they're sitting on hospital waiting lists. Unemployment's pretty low. It's not as low as it was a year ago because of the increase in the base rate and the cooling of the labour market. But unemployment is still historically very, very low. There's not this massive, big kind of pool of unemployed people that you can just pick and choose people. Well, you're getting training for this to go into this skills gap that we've got. That doesn't exist. Unemployment's low. You need to get people off of long-term sick, and that will involve healthcare investment that you want to do the opposite of. You want to take money out of healthcare investment. This is complete nonsense.
Plans when it comes to tax and actually what they want to spend are pie in the sky.
Well, actually, when you read our contract, which is published on Monday, and I hope you will thumb through the entirety of it, it's fully costed. Now, the whole point about this is actually people cannot afford to eat in this country, and that is a terrible state to be in. So what we say is that actually if we can take out, if you don't pay tax until you earn £20,000, that's 7 million people that will benefit as a result of that. And so what that will do actually, and there's a real problem, and you and I know this, when you're on benefit, you're penalised if you then take a job because you then fall into a tax bracket. Now that cannot be right. So this is part of the solution to get people off the
you still get more out of working than you get from universal credit. This idea that people are just on benefits because they're better off on benefits, just complete nonsense. I mean, there's been stripped away so much. Universal credit pays basically pittance. This idea that people who are on welfare payments are living the life of Riley and don't need to go to work because work doesn't pay enough. I mean, work doesn't pay enough, that's true. But you don't need to, increase the tax threshold to be able to make work pay. You need trade union bargaining rights so that workers are paid more by their employers. Taking people out of tax is a very convenient way of having a tiny little extra piece of... Increasing the tax-free threshold is a very convenient way of giving poor people a tiny little small extra amount of money to be able to spend, whilst not actually dealing with the root cause of the problem, which is low pay. Low pay is the problem, not the taxation of people who are on low incomes, which is already pretty low. The tax-free threshold is pretty high, and you don't really get that much extra. You don't really get that much extra to spend on consumption by their plans of increasing the tax-free threshold. What it is, though, it's really important that people understand this. The reason why Reform are running on a platform of increasing the tax-free threshold, which benefits everybody. Everybody gets access to this extra money because we all have that tax-free threshold available to us. That's a very small amount of money that you're giving lots of people. People who are on low incomes will say, oh, look, this is a tax cut. I'm going to have more money in my pocket. This is good for me. At the same time, they are also putting through a massive slashing of corporation tax, a tax that affects people who don't work, people who own, people who have assets, people who are rich. And the reason that they do this, the reason why they do this specifically, is because we need to understand that money is not real resources. Money is the token we use to represent the distribution of real resources, right? Money is not schools, it's not hospitals, it's not consumption, it's not the things that you buy. It is a representation of the distribution of resources. If the government gives poor people a very small tax cut, but gives gigantic mega corporations a very large tax cut, proportionally, poor people have gotten poorer. They have less of the distribution of the real resources. That's how monetary systems work. But you can hoodwink poor people into voting for increased inequality and less access to resources by fundamentally only giving them a very, very small tax cut. And that's why they do it. That's why they're running this as their headline policy. Because most poor people, most people who do earn 20k or under, are net recipients of what the state provides for them in public services. They are net recipients, whereas the people who they're giving a gigantic tax cut to are usually net contributors in terms of the national economy. So actually, you lose more as a poorer person by getting a very small tax cut in what you lose overall in public provision of goods and services and public services by what they are planning to slash away from public budgets to pay for their tax cuts for the very, very rich. And this is how the right wing and how Thatcherites sold their ideology to people. And Reform UK is just more of the same. Look how much tax we're cutting from you, this very small amount, by increasing the tax-free threshold for everybody. We're going to slash these public services because the rich people, our rich mates, who we are also giving a bigger tax cut to, don't use public services. They go private. They use plenty of other things that aren't required for public spending. That's why they do it, specifically why they do these two tax cuts at the same time. It's a really, really neat little trick that they do. It's very, 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 very smart. Devious, but smart.
Benefits and into work. And actually,
but what about the amount of tax you'll lose?
You also have, well, actually, all our studies have shown that actually, in terms of revenue, by actually empowering people and making sure that those companies then hire British workers, then the tax take will actually go up. The whole point at the moment is because we're taxing people so highly, people have got very clever tax avoidance schemes to stop paying that revenue. And actually, all the economists agree with our plan.
Well, close the loopholes then. Close the tax loopholes. If people are exploiting loopholes, close the tax loopholes. Again, this is the Liz Truss idea, that if you cut taxes, that will lead to higher investment, which will lead to economic growth, which by Laffer curve economics will therefore increase the tax base overall. Like, Google the Laffer curve to understand what the approach they're taking here as to why they think they would get bigger tax receipts by doing tax cuts. That's what Liz Truss tried to do with the mini budget failed miserably and spooked the bond markets because it was paid for through fiscal expansion, through bond issuance, rather than by cutting public spending. I think it's nonsense. Like, the Laffer curve usually taps out at 70% tax rates rather than by cutting taxes even lower than they're already cut at the moment in terms of the tax rate for rich people. And even then, like, this extra money that rich people have, they don't invest it. They take that liquidity and they put it into assets that then appreciate, because that's a better return than the lack of assurance by the risk that you take by investing in new production that may or may not have a guaranteed return. Whereas assets, especially when a government is guaranteeing people these assets will appreciate, like property, is a far surer and safer investment for them than actually increasing the productive capacity of the economy, which would lead to an increase in economic growth and would lead to higher tax receipts in the long term.
Okay, just finally, David, Nigel Farage, very famously when he became leader recently, I guess just accepted that Labour are going to win and that Reform's ambitions are to become the second party, a party of opposition to really make some waves in the House of Commons. By accepting that Labour are going to win and accepting that you are the second party, surely you have to acknowledge that you are playing a part in handing Labour that win by splitting the Conservative vote. And if you are anti-Labour policies, you are essentially putting them in Downing Street. What would you say?
I mean, the Labour policies are very similar to the Conservative policies. If you are Reform UK and you want to see this kind of bargain basement Singapore-on-Thames style, like hyper-capitalist neoliberal economy on steroids, you're not going to get that from Labour or Tory, who are promising both more of the same, like this very, very kind of thin differences between the two. And if you are somebody like that, you are this hyper-capitalist neoliberal Singapore-on-Thames kind of person, you don't see much of a difference. So you're not splitting the vote with anybody. It's just like me looking at the uni party of Labour and Tories offering very similar economic plans from a leftist, democratic, socialist perspective, right? I look at these people, I think they're both the same to me. I'm not splitting anybody's vote. I am not part of the Labour voter base. I am not part of the pro-capitalist voter base. I'm not splitting any votes. I'm voting for the Green Party because they're the only people who I see as genuinely progressive. In the same way that Reform UK voters probably look at Labour and Tory and think, well, no, nobody here represents conservatism. The Conservative Party that we trusted to bring down immigration never did. I'm not going to split a vote with them because they're not part of the same voter base. You know, we are the real conservatives. We're the only people offering people conservatism. If they want to vote for it, they can vote for us. But if they want to vote for more kind of, continuation politics, the Conservative Party is right there. I don't think people want it, though.
Well, no. Let's have a look at the polls, shall we? So if you study that poll that we've just seen, all the parties have gone down. Labour has gone down, I think, -2, -3 points. And we are taking Labour voters as well. Make no mistake about that.
Yeah, but if you put together...
No, in that same poll, Lib Dems were up 4 points, which is more than the Labour vote was down. I think you'll find Labour Party voters were moving to Liberal Democrats in that poll.
Reform and the Conservatives, though...
And also it was a different methodology too, which can change how these figures come out.
You're about neck and neck with Labour.
Well, let me say, then the Conservatives are depriving Reform of being the official opposition or indeed of getting into government. Look, the point is the Conservatives have failed this country and we have many Conservative voters coming over. We've got Conservative donors who are coming over and saying actually what we want is a proper Conservative party, a party that believes in low tax and believes in low regulation and high growth. That's what we want for this country. And so actually the Conservative Party...
I mean, lower regulation doesn't necessarily mean to higher growth. Again, we deregulated the banks, and that gave us a massive financial crisis. We allowed landlords to just be able to hoover up huge amounts of the housing stock in this country, and all that's done is push up housing prices for everybody and made the whole country fucking worse, right? Like, if we had more regulations on who could buy property, regulations on how many properties you could own, the property market would be better. This idea that less regulation is good is just nonsensical.
Party, I think, is about to implode. As you know, it's more than one party. You've got the ERG, the Common Sense Group, you've got all the various factions, and they are warring. And I spoke to Joe Johnson about this, and he said, well, it's pretty accurate, actually. The Conservative Party is pulling itself to pieces, and I suggest that if you want an effective and proper opposition, Conservative Party voters should move to Reform.
Okay, just one final question, actually, about your chances of getting elected, David. Are you whilst sort of going door to door and the like, are you leaving your hideous shirts at home so that people aren't blind?
Well, I'm not interested in that. But what I'm going to say is that there is a problem with Reform UK. As I mentioned before about the kind of voter base that they have, their voter base is very kind of fragmented in certain age demographics as well. It's mostly older people who vote for Reform UK. Because most young people are too busy dealing with the cost of living crisis to care about immigration. We're not the ones who have the triple lock on our pensions, for example. They have the luxury of caring about voting for Reform UK. And they're spread around the country. They're not concentrated in certain seats like the Conservative Party vote is. So there is a kind of ceiling to the amount of votes for Reform you can get currently, until the remainder of the country starts caring about immigration as much as older people do. Maybe once the cost of living crisis has subsided, and if they can sell their ideas to the public with favourable media coverage on the right-wing and more centre-leaning on the right-leaning and more centre-leaning networks, maybe they have a chance to try and win people over. But at the moment, like, the older Tory voters are pretty set in their ways, are going to vote Tory. They're still the plurality amongst over 65s in current YouGov polling. Reform UK aren't really making inroads in enough seats to be able to win seats. So what's going to happen is the Reform UK Conservative Party vote split, if you want to call it such a thing, is just going to put the Liberal Democrats into opposition because they have their votes incredibly concentrated in very specific areas and constituencies, whereas Reform UK and to a lesser extent the Tories really don't. So this idea Reform UK can therefore become this new opposition, I don't think that's very true until, you know, some kind of party merger happens, the Reform UK and Nigel Farage have 5 years of favourable media coverage. Maybe that will shift in 5 years' time, especially when Labour fail. But this idea that the next election, this election coming up right now, Reform UK can ever get anything other than a handful of seats, yeah, I think that's pretty far-fetched. I mean, Tory voters are dying. That is a problem the Tories do have. Anyway, that was a very, very... about the kind of length of stream that I was expecting to do. I was expecting to be streaming for about 2 hours today. So we're just coming up to where we're going to end. So I'm just going to find out who we're going to raid into. YouTube viewers, I'm going to send you into Kevin Logan. Twitch viewers, who is live? I'm going to send you Twitch viewers into Kid Notkin. Okay, so I hope you enjoy that. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone jumping in for all of the gifts, members, subs, all of the bits, all of the super chats, everybody who supported the stream. I appreciate them. Maybe, of course, you want to support further. There is a Patreon available in the description. I will be back tomorrow for some more Laura Cave, some longer bits and pieces. I'm going to do a longer stream in the afternoon tomorrow. I will be back tomorrow after I've played Magic during the morning. Kid Notkin is asleep. And apparently was playing Fallout New Vegas, not actually just chatting, or whatever. What else can I go into? Let's go into Hannah Reloaded. It's been a while. Thank you everybody for joining in today. I'll be back tomorrow, probably 4 PM is when I'm trying to stream, but it might be a little bit later depending on how long Magic takes. I appreciate everyone for jumping in today. Thank you very much. Stay safe and free Palestine.